Across the forests and lowlands of Central America, stone cities still stand in silence. They were built without metal tools, without wheels, and without animals to carry heavy loads. Yet their builders shaped massive temples, tracked celestial cycles, and organized societies that lasted for centuries. Who were these people? How did they build complex cities in such challenging environments? How did they measure time so precisely without modern instruments? And why did so many of their great urban centers decline long before Europeans arrived? These are not legends or unanswered riddles. Archaeology, inscriptions, and environmental studies now allow us to approach these questions with clarity. This story follows what we know about the Maya, how they lived, how their world functioned, and how it changed over time. It moves carefully between daily life and long-term patterns, between stone monuments and ordinary routines. From here, we step into the Maya world as it once existed, guided not by speculation but by evidence, observation, and the quiet details left behind. The Maya civilization developed in Central America, in a region that today includes southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and parts of Honduras and El Salvador. Their history stretches back more than 2,000 years, beginning around 2000 BCE and continuing well into the 16th century, long after many of their great cities had already declined. For most of this time, the Maya lived without contact with Europe or the rest of the Old World. They built their society independently, shaped by the environment around them and by ideas that evolved over centuries of observation and experience. The Maya were not a single empire. They did not rule from one capital city, and they were never unified under one ruler. Instead, they lived in a network of independent city-states, each with its own leaders, traditions, and political rivalries. Cities such as Tikal, Palenque, Copan, Calakmul, and Uxmal rose to prominence at different times, sometimes as allies, sometimes as rivals. These cities were not hidden settlements or small villages. At their peak, some Maya cities supported tens of thousands of people, with monumental stone temples, palaces, plazas, and residential districts spread across large areas of forest. The Maya environment was challenging. Much of their land was covered by dense rainforest, with thin soil and few large rivers. There were no animals suitable for carrying heavy loads, no metal tools, and no wheeled transport. Despite this, the Maya constructed massive stone buildings, carefully aligned plazas, and complex urban landscapes. Their survival depended on agriculture, and at the center of Maya life was maize or corn. Maize was not only their primary food source, it was also central to their worldview. According to Maya creation stories, humans themselves were formed from maize dough. Eating was not separate from identity. Daily meals reinforced a connection between people, land, and origin. Maya farmers developed techniques adapted to their environment. In some regions, they practiced slash-and-burn agriculture, clearing forest plots, farming them for several years, and then allowing the land to recover. In other areas, they built raised fields or terraces to manage water and soil. These systems required careful timing and deep knowledge of seasonal cycles. Time for the Maya was not simply counted, it was understood. The Maya developed one of the most complex calendar systems in the ancient world. They used multiple calendars at once. The Hab, a solar calendar of 365 days, helped regulate agricultural activities. The Tzolk'in, a sacred calendar of 260 days, guided rituals, ceremonies, and decisions believed to affect balance and fate. These calendars worked together, creating repeating cycles that shape daily life. For longer periods, the Maya also used the long count calendar, which recorded dates across vast spans of time. This system allowed them to place events within a deep historical framework, reaching thousands of years into the past and future. Contrary to popular myths, the Maya did not predict the end of the world. Their calendars emphasized continuity, renewal, and repetition. Astronomy played a practical role in this system. The Maya carefully observed the sun, moon, and planets, especially Venus, whose movements were linked to warfare, leadership, and ritual timing. Observations were recorded on stone monuments and in codices, handmade books crafted from bark paper. Temples were often built as observation points. stairways, and platforms aligned with sunrise on solstices or equinoxes, reinforcing the connection between architecture and celestial movement. For the Maya, the sky was not distant or abstract. It was a guide. Daily life in a Maya city followed a steady rhythm. Families lived in modest homes made of wood, clay, and thatch, arranged around open spaces. Children learned through observation rather than formal schooling. Knowledge was passed down through repetition, story, and practice. Markets served as centers of exchange. Without coinage, goods were traded directly. Cacao beans, textiles, obsidian tools, salt, jade, and ceramics moved between regions, connecting cities across long distances. Trade routes formed a network that linked the Maya world together. Religion was integrated into everyday life. Rituals marked transitions rather than dramatic endings. Bloodletting ceremonies, offerings, and festivals were performed to maintain balance between the human world and the forces believed to govern nature and time. Kings acted as intermediaries, responsible not only for political leadership but for cosmic stability. Death was not seen as a final separation. Ancestors remained present in memory and ritual. Burials often took place beneath homes, reinforcing the idea that the living and the dead shared the same space. Between 250 and 900 CE, a period known as the Classic Maya era, many great cities reached their height. Monumental construction increased. Art, writing, and architecture flourished. Stone stelae recorded the reigns of rulers and important ceremonial dates. Then, gradually, many cities began to decline. This was not a sudden collapse. Archaeological evidence suggests a combination of factors: prolonged droughts, environmental strain, population pressure, and political conflict. Some cities were abandoned, while others continued at reduced scale. The Maya people themselves did not disappear. Communities adapted, moved, and persisted. By the time Europeans arrived in the Americas in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, the Maya world had already changed, but it was still very much alive. Millions of Maya people continued to farm, speak their languages, and practice their traditions. This story is not about a lost civilization. It is about a long-lived one. Tonight, we are stepping into that world not to search for mystery, but to understand how it worked, how it endured, and how its people lived day by day within a system shaped by land, sky, and time. A Maya day usually began at first light. The forest did not wake suddenly, it shifted slowly. Sounds appeared one by one. Birds, insects, distant movement. Smoke rose from household fires as families prepared their first meal of the day, almost always centered on maize. Women ground corn on stone tools called metates, turning dried kernels into dough. From this, they made tortillas and other simple foods that formed the base of nearly every meal. This work was daily, repetitive, and essential. It connected each generation to the one before it. Men often worked in the fields or traveled between communities. Farming required constant attention. Rainfall was unpredictable, and timing mattered. A delayed planting or an early drought could affect an entire year. Because of this, agriculture was not just labor, it was observation and planning. Maya cities were surrounded by farmland, reservoirs, and forest. Unlike modern cities, there was no clear boundary between urban and rural life. Gardens, fields, and homes blended together. Nature was never distant. It was always present, shaping movement and thought. Children learned early by watching adults. There were no schools in the modern sense. Knowledge was passed through imitation. Skills such as farming, weaving, tool-making, and food preparation were absorbed slowly through daily repetition rather than formal instruction. Writing existed, but it was limited to a small elite. Maya scribes recorded dates, events, and rituals using a complex hieroglyphic writing system, one of the most advanced in the ancient Americas. These texts were carved into stone monuments or painted into folded books known as codices. Only a few of these books survived later destruction. For most people, history was remembered orally. Stories explained origins, reinforced values, and preserved identity. These narratives did not aim to document facts precisely. They aimed to maintain continuity. As the sun rose higher, activity slowed. Midday heat could be intense, especially in the lowlands. Work paused. Shade mattered. Rest was not seen as laziness, but as part of survival. Life adjusted itself to conditions rather than resisting them. In the afternoon, movement returned. Markets filled with activity. Goods arrived from different regions. Obsidian blades from volcanic areas, jade from distant mountains, salt from coastal flats. These materials were not evenly distributed across the Maya world, making trade essential. Cacao held special value. It was consumed as a drink, often bitter and spiced, and also used as a medium of exchange. Its importance was economic, social, and ritual. Access to cacao could reflect status, but it also connected people across regions. Political life centered on ruling families. Maya kings, known as ajao, were believed to carry both political authority and ritual responsibility. Their power depended not only on control of land and people, but on their ability to perform ceremonies correctly and at the right time. Wars occurred, but they were usually limited in scale. Conflict often focused on capturing elites rather than destroying entire populations. Victories were recorded on stone monuments, marking dates and lineage rather than territory. Power was symbolic as much as practical. As evening approached, the pace of life softened again. Food was prepared. Families gathered. The heat faded. Shadows lengthened across plazas and stone stairways. Smoke from cooking fires mixed with the scent of forest vegetation. Night transformed the Maya world. Without artificial lighting, darkness was deep. Fires created small circles of visibility, but beyond them, the forest remained active and unseen. Sounds became sharper. Awareness shifted. The night sky was clear and crowded with stars. The Milky Way stretched across the darkness, easily visible. For the Maya, this was not a distant spectacle. It was a reference point. Celestial movement reinforced the idea that order existed beyond human control, but not beyond human understanding. Some nights were quiet. Others were marked by ritual. Drums, chanting, and offerings accompanied ceremonies tied to specific calendar dates. These events were not constant. Their power came from timing rather than frequency. Sleep came in stages. People rested lightly, alert to their surroundings. Complete isolation from the environment was neither possible nor desired. Awareness remained part of rest. Over decades and centuries, this way of life proved resilient, but it was not immune to pressure. Environmental changes gradually altered rainfall patterns. Droughts became more frequent in some regions. Managing water grew more difficult. Population growth increased demand on land. Forest clearing expanded. Soil quality declined in some areas. Political competition intensified as resources became strained. These pressures accumulated slowly, unevenly, and differently from city to city. Some Maya cities adapted, others declined. Construction slowed, maintenance stopped. Buildings were left standing, not destroyed. People moved away, often to areas with more reliable water sources. This process unfolded over generations. There was no single moment of collapse. There was no final day. Life continued, just in different forms. By the late 9th century CE, many major cities in the southern lowlands were largely abandoned. In other regions, especially the northern Yucatan, Maya centers continued to thrive for centuries longer. The Maya world did not end. It shifted. And in that shift, knowledge, language, and identity endured. One of the most important questions about the Maya is also one of the most misunderstood. Why did so many of their great cities decline? For a long time, this question was treated as a mystery, even as a sudden collapse. Today, archaeology paints a much clearer picture. The decline of many classic Maya cities occurred gradually between approximately 750 and 900 CE. This process did not happen everywhere at the same time, and it did not affect all regions equally. Some cities declined early, others much later. Some never fully collapsed at all. Environmental evidence shows that the southern lowlands experienced repeated and prolonged droughts during this period. Lake sediments, cave formations, and soil analysis All point to reduced rainfall over several decades. For an agricultural society so dependent on seasonal rains, this created serious strain. At the same time, population levels in many regions had reached their peak. Cities expanded, forests were cleared, and agricultural land was pushed to its limits. When rainfall decreased, the system had little room to adjust. Food shortages likely followed, increasing tension within and between city-states. Political factors also played a role. Maya cities competed with one another for influence, alliances, and prestige. As resources became scarce, conflict increased. Rulers depended on successful rituals and prosperity to maintain authority. When conditions worsened, their legitimacy may have weakened. Importantly, there is no evidence of widespread violent destruction across Maya cities. Buildings were not burned en masse. Monuments were not systematically destroyed. Instead, construction slowed. Inscriptions became less frequent and eventually stopped. This suggests withdrawal rather than catastrophe. People did not disappear. They moved. Many communities relocated toward regions with more reliable water sources, particularly in the northern Yucatan Peninsula. Cities such as Chichen Itza rose in prominence after the decline of the southern lowlands, showing that Maya civilization continued to adapt. By the time Europeans arrived in the early 16th century, the Maya world was already diverse and decentralized. Some groups lived in towns, others in villages. Many still practiced traditional agriculture, religion, and calendar systems. Maya languages were widely spoken as they are today. This continuity is critical to understanding the Maya correctly. They were not a civilization that vanished. They were a civilization that changed form. Spanish accounts from the conquest period describe Maya communities that were organized, resistant, and deeply rooted in their land. Unlike the Aztecs or the Inca, the Maya were never conquered all at once. Resistance continued for centuries, particularly in remote forest regions. Even today, more than 6 million people identify as Maya. They live across Mexico and Central America, speaking dozens of related languages and maintaining cultural practices that trace back thousands of years. The Maya are not only part of history, they are part of the present. Understanding this changes how we view the ancient cities. Ruins are not evidence of disappearance. They are evidence of transition. Stone lasts longer than communities, but communities endure in other ways. As we return to daily life in the ancient Maya world, it becomes clear that much of its strength lay in adaptability. Knowledge was not rigid. It evolved. Agricultural techniques changed. Political structures shifted. Beliefs were reinterpreted as conditions demanded. The Maya relationship with time supported this flexibility. Because time was cyclical, decline did not necessarily mean failure. It meant transformation. Endings were followed by renewal, not finality. This worldview shaped how people responded to uncertainty. Rather than seeking absolute control, they focused on balance. Rather than building systems that depended on constant growth, they built systems that could bend under pressure. From a modern perspective, this approach appears remarkably sophisticated. The Maya did not leave behind industrial infrastructure or written philosophies in the modern sense, but they left behind evidence of long-term thinking grounded in observation and restraint. As night falls again over the ancient cities, the stones remain still. But the ideas that shaped them continue to move, carried forward through language, tradition, and memory. The forest reclaims the temples not as an enemy, but as part of a shared cycle. What was built returns to the land. What mattered most remains with the people. When we listen closely to the Maya story, it does not speak of sudden collapse or lost knowledge. It speaks of adaptation, continuity, and endurance. And in that message, there is something deeply relevant, even now. Writing and knowledge in the Maya world were closely tied to power and memory. The Maya developed a fully functional writing system, combining logograms and syllabic signs. This system allowed them to record names, dates, events, rituals, and lineages with precision. It was not a decorative script, it was a working system used to anchor history in time. Literacy, however, was limited. Writing was the domain of trained scribes, often connected to the ruling elite. These scribes held an important position in society. They were responsible for recording the deeds of kings, the outcomes of rituals, and the turning of calendar cycles. Through their work, political authority and cosmic order were linked. Most inscriptions appear on stone stelae, monuments placed in plazas or near temples. These stones often show a ruler standing in elaborate dress, surrounded by symbols of power. The accompanying text typically records a date, a ritual act, or a significant political event. The goal was not to tell a story in detail, but to fix an event within cosmic time. In addition to stone, the Maya also wrote on bark paper books known as codices. These books contained astronomical tables, ritual schedules, and calendar calculations. Only a few survive today, as most were destroyed during the early colonial period. What remains suggests a deep engagement with mathematics, astronomy, and cyclical timekeeping. Numbers were central to this system. The Maya used a base 20 counting system, unlike the base 10 system common today. They also developed a concept of zero, represented by a shell symbol, centuries before it appeared in Europe. This allowed them to perform complex calculations and maintain long chronological records. Mathematics was not abstract. It served practical needs, tracking time, scheduling rituals, coordinating agriculture, and reinforcing political authority. Knowledge supported stability. Kingship in the Maya world was deeply symbolic. A ruler was not simply a governor or military leader. He was seen as a mediator between the human and cosmic realms. His role was to maintain balance through correct timing, ritual performance, and public display. Royal ceremonies often involved bloodletting, performed in controlled and symbolic ways. These acts were believed to open channels of communication with ancestors and deities. The goal was not sacrifice for its own sake, but renewal of order. Power was displayed visually. Clothing, headdresses, jade ornaments, and body decorations signaled status. Public ceremonies reinforced hierarchy while also providing shared experiences that connected rulers and people within the same cosmic framework. Despite this hierarchy, Maya society was not rigidly fixed. Alliances shifted, cities rose and fell. Power moved across regions over time. Political life was dynamic, shaped by negotiation as much as conflict. Beyond the ceremonial centers, everyday life continued with little awareness of these shifts. Farmers planted, harvested, and rested according to seasonal patterns. Craftspeople produced tools, textiles, and pottery. Life remained grounded in routine. Food habits reflected regional variation but shared common foundations. Maize, beans, squash, chili peppers, and cacao formed the core of the diet. Hunting and fishing supplemented agriculture, especially in coastal and forested regions. Health and medicine relied on herbal knowledge accumulated over generations. Plants were used to treat illness, manage pain, and support recovery. This knowledge was practical and experiential, passed down through families and communities. As centuries passed, these systems continued to evolve. Knowledge adapted to new conditions, ritual calendars adjusted, political structures shifted. The Maya world remained complex and resilient. When European contact finally occurred, it disrupted these systems abruptly. Disease, forced labor, and cultural suppression caused immense suffering. Many forms of recorded knowledge were lost, but the underlying worldview did not vanish. Maya languages survived. Agricultural practices persisted. Ritual traditions adapted and continued, often blending with imposed systems. Memory endured even when monuments fell silent. Today, archaeologists reconstruct the ancient Maya world through excavation, inscription analysis, environmental studies, and collaboration with modern Maya communities. This work reveals a civilization that was neither mysterious nor primitive, but deeply knowledgeable and adaptive. The story of the Maya is not a warning about collapse alone. It is a lesson in long-term thinking, environmental awareness, and cultural continuity. As we return once more to the quiet rhythm of the ancient cities, it becomes clear that what endures is not stone, but understanding. Not monuments, but relationships. Not empires, but patterns of living shaped by attention and restraint. The night settles again over the forest. Stars return to their familiar positions. Time continues its cycles, and the Maya story, far from finished, remains part of the world we inhabit today. To understand how the Maya lived, it helps to slow down and spend time inside a single city, not as a visitor, but as someone moving through it, day by day. A Maya city was not a dense cluster of buildings packed tightly together. It was a wide, open landscape, shaped by movement, ritual, and environment. At the center of the city stood the ceremonial core. This area included pyramidal temples, palaces, and open plazas. These spaces were not used constantly. They were activated during specific moments in the calendar when ceremonies, gatherings, and public rituals took place. At other times, they remained quiet, present, but inactive. The temples were the most visible structures. Built of limestone blocks, they rose in steps, often topped with small shrines. Climbing them required effort. This was intentional. Movement upward created separation from everyday life and reinforced the sense of entering a different space. From the top, the view extended across forest and settlement, reminding observers of their place within a larger system. Nearby stood the palaces, long stone buildings with multiple rooms arranged around courtyards. These were not private residences in the modern sense. They served administrative, ceremonial, and residential functions at once. Rulers held meetings, received visitors, and performed rituals within these spaces. Plazas connected these structures. Wide and open, they allowed people to gather, observe ceremonies, and participate collectively. Sound carried easily across them. Movement was visible. Plazas were designed for shared experience rather than efficiency. Beyond the ceremonial center lay residential zones. Homes were modest, built from perishable materials that rarely survive archaeologically. These houses were arranged around small courtyards, often shared by extended families. Daily life unfolded here, away from monuments and inscriptions. Water management was a constant concern. In many Maya regions, there were no permanent rivers. Cities relied on reservoirs, cisterns, and carefully shaped landscapes to collect and store rainwater. These systems required planning, maintenance, and cooperation. Their success determined whether a city could support a large population. Movement through the city followed familiar paths rather than straight lines. Roads known as sakbiob connected important locations. Some were paved with white stone and extended for kilometers, linking cities and ceremonial sites. These roads were not built for speed. They were built for processions, travel, and symbolic connection. As the day progressed, the city's energy shifted. The ceremonial core remained mostly quiet unless a ritual was scheduled. Activity concentrated around homes, fields, and markets. People moved with purpose, but without urgency. Time was structured, but not rushed. Markets were temporary rather than permanent structures. On market days, specific plazas or open spaces filled with traders and goods. Exchange was direct and social. Prices were not fixed by authority, but shaped by relationship and availability. In the late afternoon, shadows lengthened across stone surfaces. Heat softened. People returned from fields and travel. Preparation for evening began. Fires were lit again. Food was cooked. Conversation gathered. As night arrived, the city changed character. Without artificial lighting, most activity withdrew into small, illuminated spaces. The ceremonial center faded into darkness, its structures visible only as silhouettes against the sky. Sound became more important than sight. Voices, insects, wind through trees. Awareness shifted inward. The night sky dominated perception, its regular patterns offering familiarity and orientation. On certain nights, rituals brought people back into public space. These events followed the calendar closely. Drumming, chanting, incense, and offerings marked moments believed to require communal attention. These were not spectacles in the modern sense. They were acts of maintenance, intended to keep balance intact. Between these moments, life remained quiet and repetitive. Repetition was not dull, it was stabilizing. It reinforced identity and continuity. Over generations, the city adapted to change. Buildings were expanded or abandoned. paths shifted. New reservoirs were built, old ones filled with sediment. The city was never static. It evolved slowly, shaped by need rather than ambition. When decline came, it followed the same pattern. Construction slowed. Maintenance stopped. People moved away gradually. There was no final ceremony, no dramatic ending. The city simply became less central. Stone remained, forest returned. Memory persisted. Understanding Maya cities in this way removes the idea of sudden collapse or lost brilliance. It reveals a society that valued rhythm over speed, continuity over expansion, and balance over permanence. As we remain within this city, listening to its sounds and following its pace, it becomes clear that its design supported not domination, but endurance. The night settles once more. The city rests, and life, shaped by land and time, continues its quiet turning. Movement was an essential part of Maya life. Although cities formed the visible centers of society, the Maya world extended far beyond plazas and temples. Paths connected villages, fields, markets, and distant regions, forming a network that allowed people, goods, and ideas to circulate continuously. Travel was slow and deliberate. There were no horses, no wheeled vehicles, and no paved highways in the modern sense. People moved on foot or by canoe, following routes shaped by terrain rather than efficiency. Rivers, coastlines, and elevated stone roads guided movement across the landscape. Some of these roads, known as sakbiyab, were constructed with care. Covered in white limestone, they stood out against the surrounding forest. These roads did not exist simply to shorten distance. They connected important places symbolically as much as practically, reinforcing political and ceremonial relationships between communities. Trade was central to this movement. The Maya world was rich in variety but uneven in resources. Obsidian came from volcanic regions. Jade originated in specific mountain areas. Salt was produced near coastal flats. Cacao thrived in warm, humid lowlands. No single city had access to everything it needed. As a result, trade networks developed early and expanded over time. Merchants traveled long distances, often moving goods across several regions before reaching their destination. These journeys required planning, trust, and knowledge of seasonal conditions. Travel during the rainy season could be dangerous, while dry months allowed easier movement. Markets were the social heart of this system. On designated days, people gathered to exchange goods, news, and information. There was no standardized currency, but certain items, such as cacao beans, held consistent value and were widely accepted in exchange. Trade was not controlled by a central authority. Instead, it operated through relationships and mutual dependence. This created flexibility. When one region experienced difficulty, others could compensate, at least temporarily. Along with goods, ideas traveled. Styles of pottery, architectural techniques, religious symbols, and political practices spread across regions through contact and observation. The Maya world was diverse, but it was never isolated. Communication did not rely on writing alone. Messengers carried information between cities, often memorizing complex messages. Oral transmission remained reliable because it was supported by repetition and shared understanding. This constant movement shaped how the Maya understood distance and connection. The world did not feel fragmented. It felt extended. Even remote communities were part of a broader system of exchange and awareness. Movement also shaped daily routines. People planned activities around travel time. Journeys were integrated into life rather than treated as interruptions. Visiting relatives, attending ceremonies, or trading goods required patience and preparation. As evening approached, travelers often stopped at familiar resting places. Fires were lit, food was shared, stories were exchanged. These moments reinforced social bonds and allowed knowledge to circulate beyond formal structures. The Maya world functioned not through centralized control, but through connection. Cities rose and declined, but relationships endured. Paths remained even when buildings were abandoned. Trade continued even as political centers shifted. This network of movement added resilience to Maya society. It allowed adaptation during times of stress and supported continuity across centuries. The world did not depend on a single city or ruler. It depended on shared systems of exchange and communication. As night settled over the land, movement slowed, but did not stop entirely. Canoes continued along quiet waterways. Travelers rested beneath the stars. Paths remained present, even in darkness, shaped by memory and routine. In this way, the Maya world stayed connected, not through speed or force, but through steady, repeated movement across a familiar landscape. A Maya year was shaped less by numbered dates and more by seasonal change. The land itself marked time. Rain, heat, growth, and dryness defined the rhythm of work and rest, expectation and response. In much of the Maya region, the year was divided into two broad seasons: the rainy season, typically from May to October, and the dry season, from November to April. This simple division carried enormous importance. The success of an entire year depended on the arrival, duration, and reliability of rain. Preparation began before the first storms. Fields were cleared carefully, often months in advance. Trees were cut, undergrowth removed, and vegetation left to dry. When the rains arrived, planting followed quickly. Timing mattered. Plant too early and seeds might rot. Too late, and crops would fail to mature. Maize was planted alongside beans and squash, a combination known today as the Mesoamerican triad. Each plant supported the others. Maize provided structure, beans added nitrogen to the soil. Squash covered the ground, reducing moisture loss and weed growth. This system reflected deep ecological understanding rather than simple tradition. As the rains continued, fields demanded attention. Weeding, pest control, and observation were constant tasks. Farmers watched the sky closely, noting cloud patterns, wind direction, and subtle shifts in weather. Experience mattered more than instruction. Knowledge was practical and earned over time. During this period, ritual activity increased. Ceremonies were performed to support rainfall, fertility, and balance. Offerings acknowledged dependence rather than control. The goal was not to command nature, but to remain aligned with it. By late summer, crops matured. Harvest brought relief, but also responsibility. Surpluses had to be stored carefully. Maize was dried and protected from moisture and pests. Storage failure could be disastrous months later. The dry season brought a different pace. Agricultural labor decreased. Travel became easier as paths dried. Trade increased. Construction and maintenance of buildings often took place during these months, when heavy rain no longer threatened stability. Ritual focus shifted as well. Calendars marked transitions between cycles. Certain days were considered especially significant, requiring attention and care. These moments reinforced the connection between seasonal change and cosmic order. The Maya calendar system supported this awareness. The interaction between the Hab and Tzolk'in calendars created a repeating cycle known as the calendar round, lasting 52 Hab years, or about 52 solar years. When this cycle completed, it was a moment of renewal rather than fear. Life continued, grounded in repetition. Longer spans of time were tracked through the long count calendar, allowing the Maya to place current events within a deep historical context. This did not mean they lived focused on distant past or future. It meant they understood themselves as part of an ongoing process. Seasonal rituals often involved community participation. Music, dance, offerings, and shared meals reinforced social bonds. These events were not spectacles designed to impress. They were practices meant to maintain cohesion and continuity. As the year progressed, attention gradually turned inward. The dry season nights were clearer, colder, and quieter. Astronomical observation became easier. Priests and observers tracked planetary movement, adjusting ritual schedules and reinforcing the connection between sky and land. Not every year was predictable. Droughts occurred. Storms sometimes failed to arrive. When this happened, systems were tested. Fields produced less. Tension increased. Communities adapted where possible, moving fields, changing planting strategies. or relying more heavily on trade. These challenges did not break Maya society, they shaped it. Over centuries, responses accumulated, forming a culture deeply aware of environmental limits. This seasonal awareness extended beyond agriculture. It influenced travel, trade, construction, ritual, and rest. Life did not aim for constant growth. It aimed for sustainability within known boundaries. As years passed, children became adults. Elders passed on knowledge. Fields were reused, abandoned, and reclaimed. The forest responded in turn, always ready to return when land rested. This slow interaction between people and environment defined the Maya experience more than monuments or kings ever could. It shaped expectations and reinforced patience. And as the cycle repeated once more, rain followed dryness, growth followed rest, and time continued its steady turning, measured not by urgency, but by return. The Maya understanding of the sky was one of the most advanced in the ancient world, not because it was abstract or philosophical, but because it was practical. Celestial observation was woven directly into daily life, agriculture, politics, and belief. The sun was the most immediate reference point. Its rising and setting marked the structure of the day. Its yearly movement along the horizon defined seasons. Maya architects aligned temples, stairways, and plazas with solar events such as solstices and equinoxes. On specific days, light would strike certain surfaces in precise ways, confirming correct timing and reinforcing the sense of order. These alignments were not decorative. They functioned as calendars built in stone. When shadows fell in expected places, people knew that cycles were continuing as they should. The moon played a different role. Its phases influenced ritual timing and were closely associated with fertility, water, and renewal. Lunar cycles helped regulate certain ceremonial activities and provided another layer of temporal awareness beyond the solar year. But it was Venus that held a particularly powerful position in Maya thought. Venus is one of the brightest objects in the night sky, easily visible without instruments. The Maya tracked its movements with extraordinary precision. They recorded its appearances as a morning star and an evening star, noting the length of each cycle. The full Venus cycle lasts approximately 584 days, and Maya calculations of this cycle were remarkably accurate. Venus was associated with transition, disruption, and power. Certain political and military actions were timed according to its position. This does not mean that every decision was dictated by astronomy, but timing added symbolic weight. Action taken at the right moment reinforced legitimacy. Astronomical knowledge was preserved in codices and stone inscriptions. Observations were accumulated over generations. Errors were corrected. Patterns were refined. This was not superstition. It was long-term data collection embedded within cultural meaning. Observation required patience. There were no telescopes, no clocks. Everything depended on repeated watching, careful memory, and comparison. This process trained attention and reinforced respect for cycles beyond human control. The night sky itself was understood as structured rather than random. Constellations carried meaning, though not always in the same forms familiar today. The Milky Way was especially important, often associated with movement between realms. Its visibility reinforced the idea that the universe was layered and interconnected. This cosmic perspective shaped how the Maya thought about their place in the world. Humans were not at the center of creation, but they were participants in a larger system. Correct action meant alignment, not dominance. This alignment extended into ritual life. Certain ceremonies were timed to celestial events. Offerings acknowledged dependence on forces that could not be controlled directly. Balance was maintained through attention rather than force. Over time, astronomical observation also influenced architecture. Buildings were modified, expanded, or repurposed to maintain alignment as political priorities shifted. The city itself became a record of changing relationships between sky, land, and authority. As generations passed, this knowledge did not remain static. It adapted. New observations were integrated. Old patterns were reinterpreted. Continuity did not mean rigidity. When environmental stress increased, astronomical knowledge remained a stabilizing factor. Even when crops failed or cities declined, the sky continued its cycles. This offered reassurance. Order still existed, even when conditions on the ground became uncertain. In moments of difficulty, attention turned upward, not in escape, but in reference. The sky provided context. It reminded people that change was part of a larger rhythm. This perspective softened fear and reduced urgency. The future was not unknown chaos. It was expected to resemble the past in structure, even if details shifted. As night fell again over Maya cities, observation continued quietly. Fires burned low. Eyes adjusted to darkness. Familiar patterns returned overhead, reinforcing a sense of belonging within something vast and enduring. The Maya did not study the sky to predict an end. They studied it to understand continuation. And in that understanding, they found stability. Belief in the Maya world was structured, detailed, and deeply integrated into daily life. It was not vague or abstract. It explained how the universe was organized, how humans fit within it, and why certain actions mattered. The Maya understood the universe as a layered structure. Above the human world existed multiple levels of the sky. Below it lay the underworld, known as Xibalba. These realms were not distant places reached only after death. They were active dimensions that interacted constantly with the human world. The sky was associated with order, movement, and continuity. The underworld was associated with transformation, decay, and renewal. Neither was purely good or evil. Both were necessary. At the center of this structure stood the world tree, a symbolic axis connecting sky, earth, and underworld. This concept appeared repeatedly in Maya art and architecture. Temples themselves often represented this connection, rising upward while rooted firmly in the ground. Maya gods were numerous and specialized. There was no single all-powerful deity. Instead, forces were distributed across different aspects of life. Rain gods, maize gods, sun gods, and deities associated with death and rebirth all played roles. These gods were not distant. They were present in weather, harvests, illness, and recovery. One of the most important deities was the maize god, often depicted as youthful and reborn repeatedly. His cycle mirrored the agricultural year: planting, growth, harvest, and return to the earth. This reinforced the idea that death was not an end, but a necessary stage within renewal. Rituals were designed to maintain communication with these forces. Bloodletting, offerings of food, incense, and symbolic objects were ways of acknowledging dependence and responsibility. These acts were not performed casually. Timing mattered. Correct ritual at the wrong time lost meaning. Kings played a central role in this system. Their bodies were seen as conduits. Through ritual action, rulers linked human society with cosmic order. This responsibility reinforced authority, but also placed heavy expectations on leadership. Death in the Maya world was approached without finality. Burial practices varied by status and region, but they consistently reflected the belief that the dead remained part of the community. Ancestors were remembered, invoked, and honored through ritual and story. Some burials were placed beneath homes, emphasizing continuity between generations. Others occurred near ceremonial centers, reinforcing lineage and legitimacy. Grave goods reflected not wealth alone, but identity and role. Xibalba, the underworld, was not simply a place of punishment. It was a realm of trials and transformation. Stories described journeys through darkness, challenge, and renewal. These narratives did not aim to terrify. They explained the necessity of change. This worldview shaped attitudes toward suffering and uncertainty. Hardship was not meaningless. It was part of a cycle that would eventually turn again. This understanding reduced panic during times of stress and reinforced patience. Ritual calendars marked moments when communication between realms was considered especially open. These days required attention, care, and restraint. Community participation reinforced shared belief and collective responsibility. Over centuries, these systems evolved. Deities merged, roles shifted, and practices adapted to new conditions. Belief was not frozen. It responded to experience. Even as cities declined and political structures changed, these underlying ideas persisted. They were carried forward through language, story, and daily practice. When monuments fell silent, belief continued. When European contact disrupted Maya society, many rituals were suppressed or altered. But the fundamental worldview did not disappear. Elements survived, often blended with imposed systems, continuing quietly within communities. Understanding Maya belief helps explain why their civilization endured for so long. It provided meaning without rigidity, structure without inflexibility. It allowed adaptation without collapse. As night returns again over the ancient landscape, belief does not announce itself loudly. It exists in habit, in timing, in the way people respond to change. It shapes behavior, even when unspoken. The Maya did not seek to escape the world through belief. They sought to understand their place within it. And in that understanding, they found resilience. By the late 15th century, the Maya world had already passed through centuries of change. Many of the great classic cities were quiet, their plazas empty, their temples partially reclaimed by forest. But Maya life had not ended. It had shifted, spread out, and adapted. In the northern regions of the Yucatan Peninsula, Maya communities continued to thrive. Cities such as Mayapan served as political and ceremonial centers, though on a different scale than earlier capitals. Power was more distributed. Authority rested less on monumental display and more on alliance and negotiation. Maya society at this time was diverse. Some people lived in towns, others in villages scattered across farmland and forest. Trade networks remained active, markets functioned, calendars were still observed. Rituals continued to mark important moments in the year. When Europeans first arrived in the Caribbean and later on the mainland, the Maya were not aware of these events. There was no single moment of contact, no immediate transformation. News traveled slowly. Changes arrived unevenly. What followed was not a sudden confrontation, but a long period of disruption. Diseases spread faster than people. Epidemics reached Maya communities before soldiers or missionaries did. Populations declined sharply in some regions, weakening social structures and disrupting knowledge transmission. Spanish attempts to control the Maya were met with resistance. Unlike centralized empires, the decentralized nature of Maya society made conquest difficult. Some communities submitted under pressure, others retreated deeper into forested regions. Resistance continued for generations. The last independent Maya kingdom, Nopeten, fell in 1697, more than 200 years after the first European contact. Even after this, Maya identity did not disappear. Language, agricultural practices, and belief systems persisted, often quietly, often outside official structures. Today, Maya languages are still spoken by millions of people. Traditional farming methods continue in many regions. Ritual calendars survive in adapted forms. The ancient worldview has not vanished. It has endured. Archaeology has transformed how we understand the Maya. Excavations, inscriptions, and environmental studies have replaced myths of sudden collapse with evidence of long-term adaptation. Collaboration with modern Maya communities has added living memory to scientific interpretation. What emerges is a picture of a civilization defined not by mystery, but by continuity. The Maya did not build for permanence alone. They built for balance. When conditions changed, they moved. When systems strained, they adjusted. This approach challenges modern assumptions. It suggests that resilience does not always require expansion, and that complexity does not demand constant growth. The Maya world reminds us that long-term survival depends on attention, restraint, and the ability to change course. As we step back from the details of daily life, ritual, agriculture, and belief, a broader pattern becomes visible. The Maya did not separate nature from society or time from meaning. Everything was connected through cycles that returned again and again. This connection shaped how people lived, worked, rested, and understood themselves. It softened fear of change and reduced the urgency of the future. Life was not a race toward an unknown end. It was participation in an ongoing process. Tonight, as we leave the Maya world, we do so quietly. There is no dramatic conclusion, No final image of collapse or disappearance. The forest remains. The sky continues its movement. People live on, carrying knowledge forward. The ancient cities rest where they stand, not as symbols of failure, but as markers of a long and thoughtful experiment in human living. Thank you for spending this time within the Maya world. If you enjoy calm, thoughtful journeys into the past like this one, you are welcome to subscribe and support the channel. New stories will continue to explore history at a gentle pace designed for rest, reflection, and deep listening. Good night, and see you in the next story.